Tonight on Greater Boston, yet another NFL star and the first Major League Soccer player diagnosed with the degenerative brain disease known as CTE. Concussion Legacy Foundation co-founder Chis Nowinski and former Major League Soccer MVP Taylor Twellman join me. Then later, two local filmmakers who, after meeting in a most unexpected place, jail, have brought the story of Boston's busing crisis to the big screen in The Walk. And finally, an apology from me to the Massachusetts legislature. Another name has been added to the long list of former football players known to have suffered from a serious degenerative brain disease. Yesterday, we learned the Denver Broncos Super Bowl champion Demaryius Thomas had stage 2 chronic traumatic encephalopathy, better known as CTE, when he died in December. He was just 33 and died following a seizure, one of many he'd suffered since a car crash in 2019. On hearing the diagnosis, former Cowboys receiver Des Bryant, a friend of Thomas's, took to Instagram and wrote in part, "It's a lot of us living with CTE, and the NFL know it. Most importantly, the athletes who have those symptoms are scared to speak." A damning statement for the NFL. But while a lot of the talk of CTE does surround football, with more than 300 former players diagnosed so far, it's not just football. Last week, we learned of the first public CTE diagnosis of a Major League Soccer player, Scott Vermillion, who died of a drug overdose on Christmas Day 2020 at the age of 44. I'm joined by Chis Nowinski. Chris is co-founder and CEO of the Concussion Legacy Foundation, which works to support those affected by CTE and advocate for safer sports. He's also co-founder of the Boston University CTE Center, which conducts research into the condition. He's a former All-Ivy League football player, then a pro wrestler who retired after suffering from post-concussion syndrome. Also joined by Taylor Twellman, former Major League Soccer MVP with the New England Revolution, who also retired after being diagnosed with post-concussion syndrome and has since started the nonprofit ThinkTaylor, aimed at increasing concussion awareness in youth sports. Gentlemen, it's good to see you both.
You as well.
Taylor, starting with you, the finding in Scott Vermillion's case, the formal diagnosis of CTE, I assume this is something you long suspected even before the formal finding, no?
Yes, absolutely. First off, for complete transparency, I know Scott. I played against Scott in college. I knew of him with the youth national teams, always a hard-nosed defender. And even though the reports are the one diagnosed concussion, that was not the kind of player that Scott was. He was a very hard-nosed defender. So to be shocked by this, in the sense that soccer now has CTE, you'd be naive to think that it wasn't there. I feel for the Vermillion family because I think it was a tragic experience with the kids, with the parents, with the significant others. And so hopefully this brings a little closure to them as they try to, move on with their lives and whatnot. But this is no surprise whatsoever to any of us who play sports at a high level.
When you say no surprise, I mean, as an outsider, wasn't there a study out of Europe, Taylor, a couple of years ago saying that professional soccer players there were 3 or 4 or 5 times more likely to suffer from neurodegenerative diseases than the average person? So headers are dangerous to your health is nothing new, right?
No, it's not. Although people, the power brokers want to tell you, Jim, that, well, it's the collisions, it's the act of heading. And yet when you think about it, a ball moving at 40, 50, 60 miles an hour, hitting someone's head, those subconcussive hits, you're naive to think that those aren't going to have an impact. And now you're starting to get more people in Europe asking the questions. Chris and I will both tell you, the more Europe starts asking the questions where the richest clubs in the world are, the more evolution that there's going to be had, because FIFA, UEFA, and the power brokers in this sport are going to have to listen at some point.
Chris, when I read what Scott experienced, things like impulse control problems, depression, substance abuse, it sounded like deja vu all over again. Those are not atypical for people who ultimately we find did suffer from CTE, correct?
That is the most common way people with CT have died and been diagnosed, is through suicide, and so many of them have suffered with substance abuse. Even, I've lost a couple close friends in the last year due to that.
Chris, staying with you, how much of an impact? I mean, Taylor just mentioned a minute ago, Europe are the big dogs when it comes to soccer, but it seems to me, again, as an outsider, as just a consumer of what you do and the sports you both participated in, that when you have the first in this country in a professional sport, that has to have a pretty significant impact. Does it not, or am I being naive, Chris?
No, it's having a significant impact. In fact, Taylor and I have been talking to some real U.S. soccer legends about getting involved and helping change the game to make it safer. People are starting to rally around this to realize it's a stake in the ground from which we can move forward and change the way we need to change. I mean, I think Taylor said it well. We need to speak the truth here. It is the ball hitting your head over and over again is going to cause CT in some people. And we have to accept that. And now we have to start changing, and we have to support those who are hitting the head too much. Because what's also happened is a lot of players started coming forward very quietly saying, I also have all those symptoms Scott has. I played against Scott. I need help. And so I hope we respond to this the right way and really change soccer and really start supporting soccer players.
Well, Taylor, let's stay on the professional level for a minute and then work our way down to where you guys spend a lot of your time with kids. Here's a statement from the chief medical officer of Major League Soccer, Margot Patukian. I hope I'm not butchering her name. It was the AP on June 28th. MLS is a leader in the sport, advocating for and piloting the FIFA Concussion Substitute Program, implementing a medical spotter program to identify potential head injuries, removing from play any player with a suspected head injury for assessment and as necessary treatment. There's always more progress to be made, and MLS is staunchly committed to this important work. Are they doing enough, or is that more rhetoric than reality?
That's more rhetoric than reality. However, I will tip my cap to Major League Soccer, because the moment this news happened, I think something that they wanted to launch in 2023, 2024, it may come very soon here. The concussion substitution rule is so easy to implement at the professional level. And the reason why I am such an advocate for this, Jim and Chris, is not about the pros. It's when the professional game recognizes that there is a concussion issue, then everything trickles down, and then it's easier to change the youth. It's easier to teach the youth. It's easier to create change for the betterment of the game, but it has to start at the top. That statement is more rhetoric than it is reality. However, I think reality is going to overstep that rhetoric very soon here, because I think Don Garber and some of the owners are like, wait, we can't sit on our hands the way some of the owners did with the NFL.
Taylor, can you in 15 seconds, what is the concussion substitute protocol? What does that mean in English?
In English, it means you have to properly assess the injured player if there's a suspected concussion. And every neurologist will tell me and Chris it's at the minimum 7 minutes and normally 10 minutes. Take the player off, put another player on. If that player is deemed to be concussed, keep him off. The substitute doesn't count. No problem. The problem, Jim, in soccer is there isn't unlimited substitutions. And so now managers are making medical decisions that shouldn't be making those decisions. If a concussion happens, get them off. The sub doesn't count. We will create huge amount of change if that's implemented, because every youth will then say, you know what? We got to follow the rules.
Let's talk about those youth, Chris, for a second. I read something about U.S. Soccer, which I guess is the governing body for kids soccer around the country, is that under 10, please stop me when I'm wrong, no headers at all, 10 or 11 to 13 or something, limited number. Is that a fairly accurate statement?
Under 11, no headers, and then it's limited until 14.
And is that enough? Is that where we should be with kids playing soccer, or not enough?
I would say not enough. Taylor and I worked together on the Safer Soccer program 7 years ago now to implement no heading. We think it should be no heading until 14. Give the brain a little more time to develop. And really, we just have to keep focusing on heading. I think the other thing but building on what Taylor said, that the statement by MLS, notice how it only talked about concussions. It didn't address the headers. And the headers are the issue that's causing CTE. It's not just a random concussion here or there. And we have to be honest about that with people. We need to stop hitting children in the head. That's the number one thing we need to tell parents and coaches.
Parents and coaches, Taylor, but there's a kid involved too. And I'm assuming that even if you're able to do the education, even if it requires a little force for the adults in charge, Do the kids get it, or do the kids say, I want to do this, I love doing this, I watch you do it, I want to do it too?
Well, first off, I would say to every kid and every parent out there and every coach, how many headers have you seen Messi have? He's arguably the greatest player ever, and he's never headed the ball in his life. So our game it's not like tackle football, gridiron football, rugby, where it's inherent that you've got to be involved. Heading can evolve at later stages. Throughout my years of being retired and traveling with ESPN, I make it a point to go watch youth. The youth don't want to head a ball. They don't want to head a ball. The ball's moving at high speeds. They don't want to head a ball until knuckleheads like myself, coaches and parents around the world say, let's head a ball and throw a ball at their heads. Honestly, this is why I started ThinkTaylor, Jim. If I empower the kids and we get the parents and coaches out of the equation, the kids are going to lead the change because they're going to look at the parents and go, I'm not heading the ball, and you can't force me to. I'm going to become a better player with the ball at my feet. I'm telling you, the longer that goes that way, the better off the sport's going to be. And then we can talk about 13, 14, 15, 16 on how to address this. But it's actually, no pun intended, it's a no-brainer to do this. And I find it odd that people are fighting it.
I want you to know, Taylor, in the spirit of full disclosure, when I was a kid and tried to play soccer, I wanted to head the ball, but I couldn't. So it's a little bit different kind of thing. Chris, I know you worked with the Thomas family. I mentioned Demaryius Thomas a minute ago. The thing I don't quite understand, Taylor a minute ago used the word closure. When a family decides to work with you and your colleagues, they have to revisit the pain that somebody they love lived through. Not only is suffering, but their ultimate fate. Why do they do it? Why do they decide to work with you guys?
Yeah, we wouldn't be anywhere without these families saying yes to brain donation. I reached out to the Thomas family directly, and they were really wonderful about it. The families want to give back to the game, and actually, Demaryius Thomas' mother, Katina Smith, said, Demaryius said, if anything ever happens to me, make sure I help those who come after me, and that's why she said yes.
Wow.
But also, there is that idea of closure. It puts the suffering and the changes in perspective. So many families watch their loved ones' personality change. They become forgetful, they become angry, they become all these things you don't like. And it helps you realize that wasn't their character. That was the brain disease changing them. And you can still love them for who they were when they were themselves before their brain had started to fall apart.
You know, before we go, just a couple of more things. I mentioned in the introduction, obviously you both retired from your sports because of concussions. Starting with you, how are you now, and do you worry about your future?
I'm doing much better than I was when I was hurt in 2003. I suffered tremendously for 15 years. I think I've gotten a few things under control. I'm not 100%. And the reality is the more tests we do, the more clear it is that I probably have CTE. And so I'm racing to help these doctors at Boston University develop a cure. You know, I tell Ann McKee all the time, like, you gotta make that cure for me someday. I'm gonna need it.
One of many saints over there. How about you, Taylor?
I'm thankful I met Chis Nowinski, not because he's on this Zoom, but just because there's clarity to what I was going through in 2008 and trying to fight through it. I played 10 games with it, shouldn't have done that. I still have my struggles, but for me to be able to persevere through this moment, get to this place, start a foundation, I would have never thought when Chris met me in 2009 that this actually was going to be the whole reason why I got a concussion, yet it is. I'm doing all right. You know, do I do the same things I did 10 years ago, Jim? Absolutely not. I can't. But am I at a level on ESPN where my memory's going and all that stuff? No, I'm doing a lot of things to rehab and try to stay on top of it. But it's more so people can call me and ask for help.
You know, Chris, I only have 30 seconds. One last quick thing. I assume people watching know that the only diagnosis can be made after someone has died. There was a story at the end of last year saying your colleagues at BU may be a breakthrough with MRIs, maybe at a point where it can be diagnosed among the living. Quickly, how close are we?
We've got so many great ideas and brilliant things we've learned from the brains. If everything breaks right, we're 5 years away. Let's just hope our hypotheses work out.
Chis Nowinski, Taylor Twellman, can't thank you enough for everybody watching for the wonderful work you do. Thank you both, gentlemen.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Taylor. Good to see you, buddy.
It's been nearly 50 years since the Boston public school system was ordered to desegregate, and busing began in the city. as black students were shuttled to predominantly white schools, white kids to black schools. The fear and hatred and violence in Boston grew to a boiling point, as is chronicled in a new film.
Black people have to be ready to make one choice in America. And that's the choice whether to stay in control when white people are out of control.
No, they want a bunch of kids who hate each other to walk hand in hand and sing Kumbaya.
This busing thing is driving me crazy. They're not like us. They're just not like us.
I deal with racist people all the time, and I don't say anything. So what does that make me?
Starring a slew of Hollywood heavy hitters, the movie is called The Walk. It was written by two of Massachusetts' own, Daniel Adams, who also directed the film, and George Powell. They join me now. The film, by the way, won Best Picture and Best Original Screenplay at this year's Boston International Film Festival. Congratulations, gentlemen. Good to see you both.
Good to be here.
50 years after the fact, why bother making this?
Well, because the subject never goes away, unfortunately. We are living in a time when it's probably just as bad, if not worse. And we constantly need to be reminded of trying to break apart why people are have the attitudes they do, and why they're racist, and why they're bigots.
Is that your motivation too, George?
Yeah. Well, my motivation was more to show the different degrees of hate, and like sometime in life we take hate, anger, and transfer it into hate, and it's not hate actually, it's anger. So that's why you watch the movies, there's different levels of the hate. You see the extreme hate, and then you see the passive racism, then you see the extreme racism, and so it's different levels of it. So.
And you also see, it's like the other. Is
Right.
people have no idea what anybody else is like because they've never lived with anybody else. Did I not read that you had a sister who was bussed?
Well, yeah, she wasn't bussed, but she went through the issues of the whole process.
So you had a personal connection to this too.
I mean, just living in Boston, you have a person. I went to Boston public schools, so.
You know, I don't know if it's an unfortunate irony, but I'm watching your film this weekend, and I took a break halfway through, and I turned on the television. What's on television? The Patriot Front marching through Boston with masks, these white supremacists. So as guys who know this community a bit, do you see any of the Boston in your film, in Boston in 2022?
I absolutely do. I mean,
Why'd you look at him first?
to see if he wanted to answer first.
Okay, well, you can answer a second. How about you? You do see it. What do you mean absolutely?
Well, I mean, I experienced it from the other side when I was a kid growing up in Boston. But I don't see much of a change other than, maybe a little bit in politics. And
It's more than a little bit. White guys have been mayors of the city.
Yeah.
I'm not saying everything's great, but and there's a woman of color who's running it with a lot of executives of color too.
Yeah, no, and it's great. In fact, Mayor Wu actually sponsored a screening of the movie
did she?
a few weeks ago. Yeah, which was great. We had people coming out who actually were on the bus, who were in tears watching the movie.
So how much of it, do you see that Boston and this Boston in 2022? George?
No.
You don't?
It's totally different.
How is it totally different?
Because back then, you really couldn't go to Broadway, and you couldn't get off Andrew Station, you couldn't get off Columbia Road. Nowadays, you could get off these stations, and you could go on the beach in South Boston. And so that part of it has totally changed. Like, it's more integrated right now.
So let's go back to those days of '74. You focus on two families, one with a white kid who's going to be a senior in high school, and one with a black kid who's going to be a senior in high school. Here's part of a discussion between father and daughter when they learn that the daughter is going to be bused from Roxbury to Southie. Here it is.
Roxbury High, right?
Southie.
What am I gonna do? They hate us.
Hey, you're right. They're gonna call you every name possible. And liberal Massachusetts ain't no better than Confederate Alabama. But there is nothing that you can't handle. And what have we learned about hate?
That it's like an addictive drug. Because people who hate have low self-esteem, and putting others down makes them feel better about themselves.
Is there any of what you experienced, your family experienced, or neighbors experienced in that family?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because what I've experienced is that, like, my mom used to always tell me, like, don't do what others do. basically, right? So we gotta stick with our morals and what we've taught you, and go out there like that, and keep it to that point. I've been like chased down the street off Toplift. You stay on by Four Corners on Geneva Ave, and you go up Toplift. You can't go up Toplift Street. You get chased down, and I've been rocks thrown at our cars. So it's like those experiences, that energy of that era. Everybody that lived in Boston at that time experienced that.
Did you ever say the words that she just said? They hate us.
Yeah.
You did.
Absolutely, but I didn't understand it. That's what I'm saying. We generalized the word hate, but it's not like you can't think everybody don't hate everybody, right? That's why the movie is so intimate in the household, so you can understand it's not a total hate.
What do you hope people take away from this? I mean, other than young people who aren't nearly as familiar with the history as they should be, what do you hope is the takeaway?
That I hope that they actually, I leave the film with sort of a cliffhanger. And what I want people to do is to leave the theaters, or in this case also now it's on demand, to, once they're done with the film, to think about what decision that character should make at the end of the movie. Because I leave it with one of the characters having to make a decision. Mm-hmm. And that would then, there are no answers to racism in a lot of ways other than to just get people educated and to get people thinking about the effects of other people.
And try to remove fear of the unknown, which is a huge theme
That's
here.
yeah.
So we've talked about the film you did make. Let's talk about the one, in my opinion, you should make. How'd you two meet each other?
Oh man, that's ooh.
Where'd you meet?
In prison.
In jail.
Yes.
You met in jail.
Prison, yeah.
How did that? I don't want to hear your histories. How did that happen? How'd you make this connection? I don't mean how'd you get in jail. In jail, how'd you two make a connection?
Well, I'll tell my...
Your version of the truth, and he'll tell his version. Go ahead.
Yeah, as my dad used to say, there are always three sides to the truth: your side, my side, and the truth. So, but
let's hear it.
But in any case, so I got in there, and there was a bit of notoriety because I had some a lot of
You're a big-time
press
filmmaker.
coverage.
For those who don't know, I mean, you're a big-time filmmaker.
Yeah, so it got a little publicity, and everybody knew that I was I was the Hollywood guy, and I had a lot of, especially mob guys, that all thought that their life story would make a great movie.
Their own story.
Yeah. So I literally was getting pitched in prison.
So how's he fit into this?
So what happened was I got so frustrated telling everybody, I can't do all of your stories, sort of thing. I said, look, if you want your story to be a movie, every Sunday I'm going to be in the library, and I'm going to teach you every Sunday. I'll teach you how to write a screenplay. And this guy showed up, and he was the only one that kept showing up every single week, and he started writing, and the stuff he was writing was fantastic. I mean, it was brilliant in a lot of ways, and he's great at plot and dialogue and creating characters and just. And we just threw it. We went a year.
So what's your version of the truth? Where'd you start? Forget that. Okay. Where'd you start writing? What was?
I started writing the hole. I went to a hole in prison.
Meaning solitary?
In solitary, yeah. And I started.
What do you have? Like a pen and a piece
of paper? There you go. That's just what it was.
And what do you start writing about?
And I started hearing voices in the hole, and I started writing what they were saying. And I'm writing, and it came out to be a whole story. And then I was just about to leave, and in 2 weeks, I asked the CO. I was like, "Yo, let me stay a little 2 weeks more, so I could finish the story." And usually
Wait a
they
second.
don't.
You asked to stay in solitary for 2 weeks more, so you can finish your writing?
Yes. And usually they don't do it neither. But I guess.
Well, I don't think many people ask to stay extra time in solitary, George.
Yeah. But I needed to finish the story. I had to finish the story. And I finished it. They let me finish it. And 2 weeks later, I was out. Then I went to lower security and met Dan. But when I met Dan, they told me that Dan was a director. And I was like, oh, yeah. And so dudes like, they didn't believe like he was a real director. I was like, man. I went up and talked to him. And when the information he was giving me, I was like, he's the real deal. He's the real deal.
Did you have confidence you could do this?
Yeah, because he told me to go get a Sid Field book. And my sister sent it up to me in the prison. I read it.
We only have a minute left. I asked your buddy here a minute ago, Dan, about what you want people to take away. What I take away from your personal story, I mean, is this old colony correctional center.
Correct.
And there's very little correction in a lot of prisons, as you know. There's a lot of punishment in prisons. Is there a moral to this story too, do you think?
Absolutely.
What is it?
The moral would be, don't give up. Don't take a negative and create a more negative. Create a positive out of negative.
Do I get a credit in this movie at the end, a little thing when you're rolling the thing? The Jim Braude thing in this movie.
This one's in the can, but maybe the next one's.
The next
No,
one.
you talking about our movie.
I'm talking about your movie. I'm not talking about that movie.
Movie.
Gentlemen, congratulations on the walk,
Appreciate
and congratulations on your relationship. I hope there are many more collaborations.
Yeah, I hope so
They
too.
will be.
Yeah.
They
Dan,
will be.
George, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The movie, again, is The Walk, and you can find it on Amazon Prime and Vudu, V-U-D-U, now. Before we go, a few things get me as upset as Beacon Hill's multi-month vacation in election years, especially when important business is left undone, which I mentioned yet again on the show last Monday. But as it turned out, my criticism was both premature and wrong. Here's a bit of that from when I was speaking to the head of Planned Parenthood Massachusetts about what state legislators were or were not doing to ensure abortion access for everyone, regardless of their home state laws. One of the things that I never understand, even though I used to lobby and I use the term loosely on Beacon Hill, you say the next step is to codify this. I don't understand, and this is not your problem, why legislators think it's important to go home for 6 months when there's important business to do. I won't put that on you. But assuming they can stick around for an extra week, why can't they codify this right now before they go, again, on this multi-month vacation, well, theoretically, to prepare for re-election? Why can't they do this now to assure the women from out of state who are contemplating come here that they'll have full protection? You know, I still don't like the absurdly long recess, but 2 days after I asked those questions, the House did just that, passing a bill that would extend broad protections from the actions of other states to both abortion providers and anyone seeking an abortion right here in Massachusetts. And given that the Senate already included similar proposals in a state budget amendment, it's feeling pretty likely that the two bodies will come together and pass strong legislation before they go on break. So, an apology to all those who voted yes, and as for the rest of them, well, let's just leave it at that. That's it for tonight. Please come back tomorrow for a look back on GBH News' community conversation about the Supreme Court abortion ruling. It's hosted by Marjorie Egan, Callie Crossley, and Paris Olson. That's tomorrow at 7 on GBH2, GBH Radio 89.7, or watch anytime online at youtube.com/GBH News. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget Ukraine.
A community conversation. Roe overturned. If you missed last week's gathering or you want to catch it again, join us tomorrow night at 7 on GBH2.